Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Across the Cloud series, which is where we open the floor to EU Cloud CoC members to share firsthand a bit of their experience in joining the codes ecosystem, as well as going through its adherence process. My name is Gabriela Mercuri. I'm Managing Director of Scope Europe. And for those who aren't familiar, Scope Europe acts as the monitoring body and the secretariat of the EU Cloud CoC. And today I'm here with Nathaly Rey, Director of Global Regulatory Affairs at Google Cloud. Welcome, Nathaly.
Thank you so much for having me. A pleasure to be here.
It's really a pleasure to have you. And I'm really looking forward to this one because Google Cloud is not only an early supporter of the EU Cloud CoC, but Nathaly herself has been one of the major driving forces behind the success of this initiative, and she truly captures the essence of this project. So really looking forward again to hearing your thoughts. And so without further ado, can you share a little bit about your experience in joining the code and how this journey has been, and being an active member as well as an adherent CSP?
Thank you again for having me. Well, I think reflecting on the code, I certainly think it marks a major milestone for cloud computing and data protection in Europe, as it really sets the expectation for what it means to be a compliant processor under GDPR. So thinking about the benefits, I think I'll highlight three things. The first one is certainty. It's about building your compliance program with a degree of certainty that you're investing in the right direction, that you're doing the right thing. We all have a framework that is Article 28, but that's very generic. That applies to all processors in all industry. And the cloud is very specific when it comes to the technology, the operational context. So Article 28 tells you the what, but not the how. It doesn't contain any controls framework. So being able to have a targeted discussion and a targeted framework to think about sub-processors in the cloud, right to audit, assistance obligations has been extremely helpful, again, to make sure that we are doing the right thing for our customers and our own compliance. The second thing I'll mention is about transparency and accountability, because the code is driving the ecosystem towards being transparent about your data protection practices. What happens after service termination? What are your contractual protections? How are you facilitating data protection impact assessments? How are you making life easy for your customers, or easier? I wouldn't say easy, but easier for your customers. So from that perspective, I think we've seen, and our customers have seen, tremendous benefit. The accountability. I really value the fact that it's a recognized tool under GDPR as a means to demonstrate compliance. So it's a means for you as a cloud provider to demonstrate your compliance practices in a way that an independent third party is verifying that adherence to the code. Is also a way for customers to demonstrate their own compliance, which is very helpful, especially for SMBs, where they don't necessarily have all these resources to conduct risk assessments and audits and all of that. So that piece is really valuable from that adoption perspective. On the third one, I'll just say it's an excellent tool for constructive dialogue between industry players, customers, the European Commission, data protection authorities, in which you can come together via constructive solutions, targeted discussions. This is the issue. This is how we can apply pragmatism in a way that meet regulatory expectations, and really appreciate its scope's leadership in finding that creative way of meeting that objective.
Thank you, Nathaly. And indeed, you touched upon several important elements, but I would like to focus on this cooperation element, because indeed, GDPR puts forward a quite robust framework for codes of conduct with Article 40, Article 41. It's a quite difficult journey because you need to get the green light from the DPB, from all European data protection authorities. And we see that a lot of industries, they get quite frustrated in the process because, of course, it's quite complex to harmonize technical and organizational measures across all different member states, across the industry. So it takes a village, indeed, to get there. But I think, of course, I'm a little bit biased, but I think once you get to the finish line, it's really, really worth it, because it's the kind of legal certainty that it's quite rare to achieve in this context. So could you perhaps elaborate a little bit more on the role that such core regulatory tools, such as codes of conduct or certifications under GDPR, how they can really enhance harmonization, and how important it is to have such harmonization in an environment such as cloud, which is so diverse, so asymmetric, and so complex?
Yeah. So I think it is a really excellent tool to force harmonization in a good way. On the one hand, you have this very generic GDPR for, again, a number of good reasons. It applies across the board for all industries. But then you have 27 different data protection authorities with different views, slightly different views or totally different views. And if you're able to sort of have a constructive discussion about, like, this is the issue in this operational context, in this technological context, how can we meet your expectation? And we're sitting at the table as an industry. And again, under Scope's leadership to say, like, let's think creatively. How can we meet the mark? How we can do it better? How we can, and that process of the authorities providing feedback, us iterating, putting things on the table, and getting to an agreement. I think, as you say, it takes a village to get there. But once you get it, it's once you're scaling, you going back to the previous point, you're making sure that you're going in the right direction. You're scaling. They are scaling because they have said how good look for them. So I think we saw the benefit on very important aspects, like we've discussed many times, the right to audit, for example. There is an unlimited audit right under GDPR. Cloud providers, we do have millions of customers. Would it be a good idea to have hundreds of people working around a data center? Absolutely not. And I will undermine the security of the systems of all of the customers. So how we can sit together, so what is the reasonable approach to ensure security, confidentiality, to ensure that we're facilitating the right in the right? So 100% worth practice, very enriching for us industry players. And I think it's a solid foundation for the future. So I think we've been overlooking codes of conduct certification. Should definitely be more on them.
Thank you, Nathaly. And no, very, very well said. And I would like now to perhaps take a look at the broader picture, where things get even more complex. I mean, of course, you are Director of Global Regulatory Affairs. Can only imagine how many things are on your desk, and the complexity of overlapping regulations. So privacy is not a standalone sort of compliance obligation. So could you give us some insights on what is the interplay between adhering to just such a code of conduct and other regulatory obligations, emerging ones, and yeah.
Great question. Well, we've seen an explosion of data protection laws around the world, and also not only data protection and privacy, but data-related, data governance and related. So I think it's been an interesting journey. We do maintain a global privacy program, and that's heavily inspired, not surprisingly, by GDPR, but also by the Code of Conduct, because the Code of Conduct is, again, giving us the level of detail that you need for implementation, and that you need to create a control framework. At the end of the day, we've used that when you see a new law, and obviously, as a company, you want to scale. If you have a robust baseline, then you can focus on mapping and then understanding the delta of that new law in Brazil, in Mexico, in any country, and then you can only work and focus on that delta versus starting from scratch. So from that perspective, it being very valuable. The program obviously encompasses things like managing the supply chain. How do you think about sub-processors? How do you evaluate those before they come on board? How do you do these contract flow downs? How do you audit them periodically? Of course, international data transfers, there's a lot of operational controls around maintaining DPF, around SECs, also contractual aspects of it, documentation that you need to maintain in order for third parties to evaluate the effectiveness of those controls being in place. So I'd say extremely helpful for compliance in other jurisdictions when it comes to privacy and data protections, but also in other areas of law. You see other areas coming to say, can we lean in on your privacy program to do this X other? So definitely helpful towards the responsible data practices in compliance at scale.
Thank you, Nathaly. And again, you touched upon several important elements. And I would like to focus now on not the easiest one, perhaps, but international data transfers. I mean, it's the usual suspect in the room is still a major challenge under the GDPR. And knowing that the EU Cloud CoC General Assembly has been working on a solution under Article 46, which is the International Data Transfers module. Can you give us some insights on what do you believe to be the potential role of a code of conduct to address this challenge?
Well, I think first we've learned that it's critical to have a resilient strategy when it comes to international data transfer. So we need to think about more than one mechanism. And taking a step back, it's worth reminding the intention of GDPR is not to stop the data flows. It's actually to ensure that when data leaves the EEA, the protection follows the data. And that's the spirit behind. So we have several tools, as we know, adequacy decisions and SECs and BCRs. So going back to one, resiliency, because the landscape has been certainly unstable. But second, how can we unleash the potential, tap into the potential of codes of conduct and certification to add more resilience to that data transfer toolbox? So I really see the benefit of this initiative in the context of cloud computing, in which, again, we have a very specific technological context and technological capabilities to be able to deal with those data transfer risks. I see the value of being able to incorporate things like the EDPB guidance on supplementary measures. I see the opportunity for distinguishing between YAS, PAS, and SAS and say, this is the reasonable supplementary measures that we expect. And this is what makes sense for each layer of the service. And this is what you should expect on a service by default versus this is service or product capabilities that the customer may choose to configure depending on the specific risk, going back to the risk-based approach by GDPR. So again, the ability of tailoring the discussion and the problem and the solutions to an industry, sitting together with Scope's leadership, with data protection authorities within the industry, and come up with creative solutions towards a more stable landscape, which is absolutely essential for innovation, for digital transformation, especially in the era of AI. So I do really see a way forward, a fertile territory, and cannot thank enough all the support we're getting from all places in the industry, and again, your leadership in making this happening.
Thank you so much, Nathaly. This has been extremely helpful to understand all of this complexity and what is the added value of these two, and really looking forward to the next steps, notably to the next steps when it comes to the International Data Transfers module. So if you're interested to learn more about the EU Cloud CoC and the module, do not hesitate to reach out to us at Scope Europe. We really look forward to continuing this discussion and also to seeing you in our next episode. Thank you very much and see you around.
Thank you for having me.